What's up, everyone? I'm Ruthina Porterfield, and this is Liberated Conversations with Ruthina. I am super excited about this featured episode of the month. It is a conversation with an old friend, another one who I haven't seen in about 25 plus years. It is also a conversation that I feel very honored and blessed to be having. I am going to be talking with Jamila Gadsden. She is a fellow Charleston alum, fellow Charleston native. She is a fellow Buse Academy alum. And she is also someone who lost her aunt, Myra Thompson, in the shooting at Mother Emanuel AME Church. It was a shooting fueled by racism and hate that took the lives of 9 people on June 17th, 2015. But today, we are going to be talking about the legacy of those 9 people and how on the 17th of this month and every month following, you can be a part of that legacy. So join the conversation. Hello, Jamila. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I think we are so much better with take 2.
Yes, we are.
And I am
so good to see you and to be able to talk with you.
Likewise. Likewise. It's amazing what technology can do, how it has kind of brought people together from miles apart, from decades apart.
Yes.
It's super cool. It
really is.
I want to jump right in, if that's okay with you.
That's perfect.
And I kind of want to start at the beginning because I think I have chosen to look at it as a privilege. We have had the privilege of growing up in the Deep South. We are a part of a generation that is directly behind the generation of the civil rights movement. We have parents that lived it, right?
Yep.
But I think we also are privileged in that we are the generation immediately prior to this technology age, where they are capturing things that we never saw or fathom was happening around the country. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. We're like bridging the gap.
Right.
I feel like, my mom lives here with me and my son. And I always
you are
bridging the gap. He thinks I'm ancient, and she feels like, okay, this new world, what's going on? So you're like bridging the gap, reaching back and looking forward.
You are a house that is representative of what's going on for real.
Yes.
Yeah, I think part of that was going to Buse Academy. You had, I'm so grateful that you had a chance to listen to the conversation that I had with another one of our classmates, Jameson, as well as the conversation with the first principal of the first magnet school that ever was established in Charleston, which I had no idea that we were kind of making history there.
Yeah, we were. It was, I remember when we graduated from Buse, we were the first of the first.
Right.
The last of the first.
I think we were kind of, we were the last of the first.
The last of the first. And it was a scary time. Transitioning to a new school. I think any kid, moving to a new school, that's frightening because you're the new kid on the block. Well, we all were new kids on the block.
We all were.
We had no clue what we were getting into. And
not at all.
I even remember like the first person I met when I went to Buse, Melanie Lichtenstein. And
I remember
her. Saunders. Yeah, and it was like, ooh, I've never been to school with white people.
Which is what I want. Which is exactly what I want to get into, because
like you, different thing. And I felt
Yeah.
like even they were like, okay, well, I've never been to school with you either. So
Yeah.
what do we do? And I always have shared with my mom and a few other people how the hesitation and any angst never came from the students, the other kids.
No,
It was always with the grown-ups. So I feel like
absolutely right.
being that group of students who started Bust Academy in their inaugural year,
Yeah.
we were that group that even we talk about. I mentioned being the bridge, but we taught those adults how important it was to know us and
Yeah.
to understand who we are and to understand our culture. Even though we all were right here in Charleston, there were unique differences.
Right.
Even from, I grew up in downtown Charleston and felt
Yes,
like
that's right. That's
there's
right.
a difference. There's a difference.
The difference.
You grew up in North Charleston. There were some who came from, Hollywood, and
That's right.
the, not from the
Yeah.
city. Some on the island, and
Red top
it was
girl.
different. Yeah. So we were all learning each other and learning how to appreciate each other, how to grow with each other, because we truly grew up with with a core set of people
We
from
did.
third grade through eighth grade at Bust Academy. We grew up together.
We really
Um,
did. We really did.
the Another reason my experience there was so unique and really meant a lot to me. My mom and her sisters went to Bust when they were in elementary school.
What?
Before the school
I
closed and then reopened as Bust Academy. My mom went there. So
oh my
I think my grandparents
gosh.
went there. And so it was like a generational thing. I felt this that like this was where
That's
I
amazing.
belong. Like this is where I
Amazing.
belong. My church was right across the street. And
That's
so
right. I think I
that
remember that.
whole neighborhood, was my home. But when I went inside the building, there were times where I felt a little unfamiliar.
Me too.
you know, or like, we have to navigate a new situation, or you have a new teacher who doesn't really
Right.
know all about us. And,
That's
we have
right.
to, teach them that, yes, we
Yeah.
are here and we're
Right.
smart.
And we
We're
are
just as
smart.
smart as the next.
Yes.
And, you know, we can
Yeah.
do this. We
That
have
it
something to offer.
We do,
So,
and it was a huge transition. It was the first, like I said in previous podcasts, which I definitely encourage everyone to go back and check out. They are on my website. These were the first. This was the first time I had been to a white person's house before. This
yeah.
was the first time.
Ooh,
It wasn't even just about being surrounded in school,
yeah.
but this was the first time going to
Mhm.
homes that did not look like mine.
Looks like ours.
I wanted to ask you if you had this experience that I had, like I talked about on, I think with the conversation with Jameson, where I went to white birthday
Mhm.
parties, but they never came to mine.
Pretty
Did you
good.
have
Yeah,
that
I did.
same?
I
You
did.
did?
So I remember going the first time I spent the night to someone's house.
Oh, girl, you had to sleep. I didn't even have a
I
sleepover.
did. And it was like crazy because my dad, I know my mom was like in the background talking through that whole experience because I didn't get to go spend the night at family's house because my
Whoa.
dad was like, "No, I'm picking you up. You're coming home." And I
Right.
do remember, and I say I spent the night, but he might have come and picked me up. But
Maybe.
I just remember going to Gene Sanders' house, and there were a couple of things that like stick out to me so much. Is that one? where she lived in downtown Charleston, we didn't
Oh, I
venture,
remember where she
like,
lived.
you know,
She lived
that
in the
on
upper
that side,
crust. Like,
that cross Calhoun, that side
woo, yes,
of
I
town.
remember,
Like,
girl.
so I was like, oh wow, I get to go to, like,
The
I get to
big,
go to this house. Like, it was a,
yes,
yeah. And so she, just an amazing friend that we had the privilege of growing up with.
right.
Never, I mean, I think just because children are, and this is why I know racism, hatred, all that stuff, it's learned,
Yes,
because that was never a thing for us.
not at
And I feel like I remember talking to my parents and saying, she's just my friend, because that's
all.
all it
Oh,
was. She's just my friend.
wow.
And I think, when again, we had to be that bridge, even with, I think now of the struggle that our parents, who grew up during the civil rights era, had
Right.
to deal with, knowing that we were going to eventually have these kinds of experiences, and how would they handle that,
Yeah,
knowing, one, what family might say, even if they were progressive in their thoughts and thinkings about it. You still have, what your community thinks and how they're going to feel about it. And so
absolutely.
all of that, like, now I think about all of that, and I remember, when you were talking about that, um, on that other, podcast, like, I was like, yes, I remember feeling like, oh, yeah, I am the odd one, odd man out.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
oh,
so yeah, I do recall having those experiences, but they're some of the ones that I am grateful
me
that
too.
I was able to have, and
Me
that
too.
my
Absolutely.
parents allowed me to have, because that was a key thing, for your parents to allow you to have those kinds of experiences.
Me
So
too.
I'm grateful and feel blessed that I was able to.
Yeah, and I'm going to put this comment up. It's quite long. I might need to read it.
Okay.
She says, absolutely, the work continues in education. Educators continue to learn culture and connections. We need to be acknowledged and included. And I think she's
Yeah.
talking about us as Black people.
Yeah.
We have a lot of work to do as humans. The fact that you guys remember these things, wow, tells a
Right.
story. Yeah, because this stuff has an impact on children. I
There.
think
Yeah.
even the children, and you're a mom, you know,
Mm-hmm.
your son is going to remember this stuff. He's going,
Oh,
everything that's happening, he's going to remember. I
he
remember,
will.
yeah, I remember even the little details of the fire alarms going off. The
Mm-hmm.
fire alarms going off and having to go to Gilliard Auditorium. I
Yeah.
remember the details of walking to Francis Marion Park, which I want to kind of use as a segue
Mm-hmm.
because I was kind of clueless on exactly. I didn't know who Francis Marion was. We just kind of walked to the
Yeah.
park because that's where we
Right.
had PE sometimes. We had field day
Right.
there sometimes. There was a statue there. We had no clue. And it was not taught. We grew
What
up in a
any of that
time,
meant. Mm-mm.
right. We grew up in a time where Black history in school was limited to Martin Luther King. Slavery happened, Civil War ended it. Martin Luther King came along, and now we can sit at the front of the bus. Like that's,
And we're great.
and
And we all love each other
it's just
because
one
of,
big happy country. Like that's
right.
that's what we grew up in.
But you
And
knew, you had that feeling that,
yes,
this is
there's
not,
more to the
there's
story.
something, there's a little something. And I think that was trying to navigate, especially as an 8-year old. Like, we were 8 when we went,
Right.
8, 9, 10, to navigate, that feeling, even
Yeah.
if it wasn't verbalized, to navigate how people made you feel. And I think we always have to be cognizant of how our actions even facial expressions,
Yes.
mannerisms, everything can inform someone else of who you are and
Yeah.
what your inner thoughts are and what you believe. And so we always have to be cognizant of that, and just know that no matter what it is, it enacts a feeling in someone. It
Yeah.
builds an emotion for someone else. And
Right. I think, you know, not being taught that stuff in school and kind of having to learn on your
yeah.
own, that type of stuff. As far as like growing up in Charleston and the racial stuff that was, we grew up in a time where there were no cell phones, there were no,
Mhm.
tablets and stuff.
Right.
So stuff that was happening around us, we were kind of unaware of, but there was
Right.
still stuff going on. Like I
Oh.
remember, I'll roll with me. I remember, okay, we all remember where we were when the Challenger exploded, right?
In Miss Pike's
I
class.
I was sick that day. I remember I was sick that day and I was home. But here's what I remember. I remember them talking about the astronauts that were on the spaceship on the Challenger.
Mhm.
But I remember Ronald E.
Mhm.
McNair. That's what I
Mhm.
remember. And I
Agree.
remember that because he was the only Black person on the Challenger. So
Yeah.
things like that stick with us, right? And then I remember
Exactly.
them renaming the school. I
Mhm.
remember I remember Jesse Jackson running for
The
president.
president pushed the
Remember?
coalition. I remember it.
I
Yes.
remember those things. And so, but we didn't, because there were no cameras, we didn't see the other stuff that was happening to Black people in the midst of this. Now, I will say this, Jamila. I think we saw the effects but didn't know the background. For example,
Yeah.
like in my book that's coming out next year, I talk about when my brother got a ridiculously long sentence for a drug offense. Now,
Mhm.
back then, this was in the 90s, the huge crime wave. And back then, it was just, oh, this is what's happening. But now that we know the background of the crime bill, I understand now, oh, this wasn't just because it wasn't even
Uh-huh.
his third offense. This was his
Oh,
first.
yeah.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
And so the crackdown that was happening, not just on drugs and crime, this was a target for us.
Right.
We
Right.
had a target on our backs. And this was a way to get to us as Black people.
Right.
And but back then we didn't have that,
But
all of the stuff that was going on.
know when you know the backstory.
When you know the backstory. But
When
I'll
you
tell
know
you
the
what
back.
we did know. We knew who Strom Thurmond was. And
Yeah.
we knew, and this is a guy who represented South Carolina, and this is huge for us to talk about now because we're coming up on an election
Right.
in literally what, 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
We knew who Strom Thurmond was and how he was the senator. He was in the place where Lindsey Graham is, where we're trying to vote him out.
Mm-hmm.
Or where
Yeah.
you guys, I wish
Wow.
I was in South Carolina to help
Yeah.
vote you,
I know.
that I could help
We
vote
want
him out.
you back.
Every vote counts, people.
I
Um,
know.
but Strom Thurmond was in that seat when we were growing
Right.
up.
Right.
And we
Right.
were very clear that this was a racist that was in that office. We were very
Right.
clear. And I think, and the reason why I'm going through this is because I want people to understand the environment that led up to June 17th, 2015. I
Right.
think people want to isolate that date, especially nationally.
Or
What do you
just or even that person to think that, oh, this is a one-off.
think? Right. Yeah.
And to even think about how could we, how in 2015, how could it come to that? And it's for me and many of us, it's like, oh, we can give you the backstory. We we
Definitely.
can we can go back and share and let you know that we are not very far removed from, you know,
No, not at
civil
all.
rights era, or when, when tensions were extremely high, and those, you could like cut it with a knife. Like, we're not
Yes.
that very far removed from it. um and I think, especially our those we grew up with, there's a like a kind of back and forth, I think, that sometimes we tend to go through because we've seen the progress. We've been a
Right.
part of the progress and probably have influenced a lot of the progress because we were thrust into it without, really having any say so. So we had to adapt and adjust, but we still had to understand where that came from. And
Right.
our understanding of that, we had to understand it in such a way that, we had to seek that understanding. Because, like you said, it wasn't something that was just placed before us.
Right.
Um, One of the other memories I do have from our time at Buste, and why I mentioned about the church being right across the street. So every day, depending on whose classroom I was in, I could look out the window and see my church. And
Jamila, I'm going to cut you because I want you to be very clear what church
oh,
it was
okay.
that
I'm
was
so
across the
sorry.
street.
Yes,
Be very
Mother
clear.
Emanuel AME Church
Right.
was right across the street from Buste Academy. So,
Right.
and I don't know if you remember this, but when we were in fourth grade, we did a field trip there. And it was from a I think we used to do like a morning announcements, and somebody got to speak in the morning. And one morning I shared how my family grew up, like
Yes.
my mom and grandparents went to Buste before it was Buste Academy, and
Right.
that my church, Mother Emanuel, across the street was a part of the Underground Railroad.
That's
And
right.
our teacher at the time, Mr. Reardon, was like,
Mr.
"That is
Reardon.
so awesome. I think we should go visit. Could we go visit there?" And I remember going and asking my pastor, "Could could my class come and visit the church, tour the church?"
How
And we did.
cute.
Like we did.
Yeah.
And he said I remember him saying, "But you're gonna have to teach them about the church."
Mm,
I was like, "Okay.
mm.
I guess I'm gonna have to learn a little more than what I know now if I'm gonna, take them on a tour." But I remember that, and I remember other like our classmates saying, "Wow, I didn't know that all of that happened right here." Like
Yeah.
we were steps away from things that you should have been reading about in
And
history books.
yes.
Just
Yes.
steps away from it, and just the impact. So, it is very like for me, when I talk about Mother Emanuel
Yeah.
and talk
Yeah.
about the experiences that I had growing up, it's more than just the place I went to on Sunday morning, or you know the school I went to for a couple of years. Like it
Right.
really did shape who I am, and all of it all of it was intertwined, and all of it has played a part in who I am now and who I continue to be, and how I teach my child, like the
Yeah.
experiences
Sure.
that I'm
I'm
forcing
sure.
on him. That sometimes he does things that I don't want him to do.
I yeah, I think it was
It's
important.
being forced on me, but it's like you.
Yeah, she froze for a second. Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand, you know, with
Hey,
me growing up in Charleston, and Jamila made such an awesome point that we grew up in the school.
Ruthina.
Yes,
Oh,
I
okay.
can hear I can hear you now. You just froze for a second, that's all. Um, but I think it's important for people to understand. You're getting a shout out from another parent talking about what you're
Okay.
making you're getting a comment from another parent
Okay.
saying a good job for forcing it on him, force that history on your son because it's important. It's important for him to know that. Um, yeah. So
I see.
yeah. So because it is important. This is
Gotcha.
stuff that they need to grasp and they need to know. And the reality is
It's
they may
critically
not get it
important.
now. It's so important. They may not get it now, but they'll get it later. Like they'll get it. And like we said earlier in our conversation, these are things we remember. These are things that we remember later on. So when we talk about the climate, so I want to move a little closer
Yes.
to June 17th. And um, one of the things which was so cool when we talked in our pre-interview when you mentioned uh,
Okay.
Donald Trump announcing his
Yeah.
candidacy after. But what I actually remembered is that only 2 months prior was when Walter Scott was shot and killed as he was running away. And so he was shot and killed in his back as he was running away from the police in North Charleston.
Yes.
So I think, again, this all contributes to the climate. June
Yeah.
17th, 2015 is not an isolated
Mm-hmm.
date. This stuff was going on for a long time. And so we saw what happened with Walter Scott literally only 2 months
Mm-hmm.
prior. And then June 17th hits. And we have this young man who comes in and does that.
Right.
And I'm like, it's weird when you see your hometown. I wrote a blog about it. It's very weird when your hometown becomes a headline, especially when you live in a small
Right.
kind of place that no one ever really talks about. Um, it almost
Right.
annoys me sometimes, Jamila, when because people talk about the civil rights movement and racism in the South, and I'm like, you do realize that South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, right? Like we grew up in that state, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, it wasn't as much
Right.
of not
Right.
we knew it. We knew what was going on.
Exactly.
So I guess my question is in the aftermath of June 17th. And let me ask this question so we can clear it for everyone who's listening, because I want to get those questions of people who has just those quick, simple questions. Things like, where were you when you got the news about the shooting? I don't know if she heard me. Did she hear me? I don't know if she heard me. Oh, I think she's having a delay. Yeah, I think she's having a delay.
I I think I heard you. Repeat it one more time for me.
So I wanted to ask
Can you
where,
repeat it one more time for me?
okay, yes, yes. Where were you when you got the news about June 17th, about the shooting?
Okay. So I was actually traveling. I traveled quite a bit for work.
Mhm.
And I was coming back from Georgia.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, stopped at a friend's house and got the call from my godfather, who actually lives across the street from my aunt, and he was calling just to check to see if if I was at church, or because there was something
Oh,
going on at the church. And yeah, I got a couple calls like back to back with this, where are you, and I'm like, I'm in Colombia. At that point I was in Colombia. And I just remember thinking, when I heard, oh, there was a shooting, thinking, oh, it was outside of the church and maybe
yeah,
something happened, and what have you. But never in a million years would I've thought that it would have been a shooting inside the church. So
yeah,
once I realized that, I immediately said, turn on the news. Like, because I I'm like, this got to be on the news. Like, turn on the news. I know I'm in
yeah,
Colombia,
yeah.
but turn on CNN. Let me see what's going on.
Right.
And when I saw my church on TV, it was like, oh, like it got real. And
Yeah.
I remember sitting there for about a minute or so and hearing that there was apparently a shooting inside the church. And I'm like, my goodness, what in the world? What's
Yeah.
happening? And it dawned on me, like, if there was a shooting inside my church, then
Mhm.
I know the people who were involved. And I think in
Really?
that moment, yeah,
Yeah.
it was a I didn't know who was there. I didn't know anything. And I think like a lot of people was sitting there waiting to hear something from my past.
Yeah. Yeah. She froze for a second there.
That was oh, of course, this is like in the midst of getting phone calls from different people, just trying, I go to Facebook because I'm like, surely something's going on. And a
Or with
friend of
Facebook.
mine, a friend of mine who lived in Columbia, had like posted, Jamila Gadsden, you need to let me know that you're okay. Like, because I guess she
Wow.
might have tried to call me and couldn't reach me. And so at this point, it's like getting to be real. And so I'm trying to I got in contact with my mom because I had a conversation with her earlier, about when I was gonna expected to get back home because she was going with my aunt to the church because my aunt Myra was going to be teaching Bible study for the first time that night and
Oh,
wanted them
wow.
to be there. So
Oh,
she was
wow.
just calling me to see, when I thought I would be in town because she had my son. So
Oh, yeah.
for whatever reason, yeah, for whatever reason, I was one delay after another getting back. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like let me get back in touch with her because I don't know if she's there.
Oh, that's,
But
yeah.
when I called, yeah, for God was in the midst of everything. I tell you, even as bad as things were,
Right.
um, he said we ended up not going. And when I was talking to her and I said, well, I'm hearing that there was a shooting at the church. She didn't even know what was going on. And
Okay.
then when she did call me back, some other calls transpired, and um, my my aunt told me that that's when she said, "Well, I know that Myra was still there," and
Mm.
I think that's when felt like everything in me just dropped, like just hit the floor, like that. I know the people who are there, like not
Yeah.
just I know their names, but I know them,
You
and
know them.
this is not, yeah, I know them. And my mom has a friend who's on the police force in Mount Pleasant, and she called to in a panic, like wanting to know where we were, and she said, well, I don't have all the details, but we're on standby, so it's pretty bad. And
Right.
I think in those moments, that's when I realized, still thinking, like hoping for the best, like maybe, okay, maybe if somebody got hurt, but they would be okay if the police got there in time. But I think it wasn't until my mom called back, and it was the first time I can remember ever hearing her cry, like really cry, and to the point
Wow.
where she was just barely like calling off names, and all I could say to her was stop, like please stop, like the
Wow.
she would call out another name and I'm like, stop, just like we
Yeah.
get to the fourth name and I can't take it anymore, like you
Yeah.
please stop. So that's
It's a tough
What
moment.
what I yeah, it was totally unreal. Like I felt like I was in a movie. Like
I'm sure.
nothing about it seemed like it was anything that would actually be happening.
Right.
So I
Right.
kept talking to people, watching the news, like I cannot believe what I'm seeing. And then to later on find out, more about what the cause of this was. And I will say this, I after, I when I found out, what happened with my aunt and all the others, there is no, like, it's really, you can't really just separate, like, oh, I lost my aunt and it was just that one person. Like, you can't separate them. It's nine people that
Right.
you are accustomed to seeing, hearing from, having conversations with. Maybe not all of them on a regular basis, but regular enough to where it has an impact.
Yeah.
And the day or so after, or a few days after, having to have that conversation. My son was 4 at the time,
Right.
and to have that conversation with him, because I realized there is no keeping this from him. Like, you can shelter children from certain things, but with the way like technology and everything else,
Yeah.
everybody gets news instantly. There was no, unless we were just going to turn the TV off, there was no keeping him from this. And then
No.
we're kind of thrust into, going to court, or going to a
Oh,
prayer
wow.
vigil, or going to this, or being a part of, having family members come to meet with authorities to hear the details about that. And so it got to a place where I was like, okay, I'm going to have to be mom and sit him down
Yeah.
and share this loss. Like,
Right.
we haven't experienced anything like this before. And
Right.
so to have to share that with him and answer the questions that, even at 4,
Hmm.
the why, the
Yeah.
who
Okay.
who would do something like this, or why would they do something like this, or questions about I remember him asking me one day, like, where were the police? Because of course,
Mm.
after this happened, we have police all, at the church all the time. And he's like, well, where were they when, you know, the
Wow.
bad man killed Aunt Myra and everybody else? And like,
Wow.
they came when they could, but it was too late. And he's like, oh, because they're there now, but why weren't they there when
Wow.
that was happening? And it's like, well, 4-year-old, don't
Yeah.
ask hard questions,
I know.
but
But it's the childhood logic. It's their logic.
it's their logic, and it makes perfect sense.
It really
And
does.
it's, and those questions, like, we still to this day, 5 years later, have those kinds of conversations about, well, why did this happen, or couldn't this have been the case instead of that? And it's like, well, either I we can have the conversation, and sometimes I'm just not in a place to where I am in the right headspace to even provide an answer, and I have to say sometimes I can't. We'll have to discuss that another time,
Another time.
because um, one of the things that I share with people often is that the the grieving process for something like this, and you mentioned Walter Scott, and I now anytime something of this magnitude happens, when I say my heart goes out to the family, it truly does, in a totally different way than it did before,
Hmm.
because not only do you grieve the loss of whomever it was, your loved one, your friend, your family member, whomever it was, it's such a public thing
I
that
was going to ask you about that.
you don't have the space to grieve like you really want to or you should.
Yeah.
That like I feel like you're robbed of the person you lost and then you're robbed of that too. So I that was some work that I had to do within myself because it was so public, and I was angry a lot of times because I just like we went back to church that Sunday after, and I just wanted my church. I just wanted it to be my church family,
Yeah.
and we didn't get that. And so I got angry again. And it may have just been the emotion I had in trying to deal with everything, but I felt like we just needed our space. We needed to be together because um, for the families, the first time we really saw each other after it happened was going into the courtroom. And so
Wow.
you don't have time and space there, and then everybody is dealing with their own family circumstances
Right.
the way that they can. So
Yeah.
that was what was really difficult and a long process. It's still a process for me now, um, even 5 years later, just
Right.
how like grieving the way that people need to when they suffer a loss.
Especially like
I
that.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know the I'm glad you touched on the dynamic of having to grieve have this private experience in a public space. I
Mhm.
one of the things that I thought about as I watched from 3,000 miles away was as a person that's from Charleston, South Carolina, and knowing a few of the people that passed away, even myself, because I'm from Charleston, living in LA, and
Yeah.
hearing people talk about it, I was defensive.
Oh
I
yeah.
was like, hold up, wait, you're not from, you don't know, like, you
Yeah.
don't
There were
understand.
things people said that were just like, why would they let a white boy walk into church anyway and not be well? If you knew, like
This,
white people walk in our church all the time. It's a historical landmark. We got College of Charleston right down the street, so kids come all the time. I when they said it was a 21-year-old, I thought a kid from the College of Charleston. Like what in the world?
right,
What were? Just anything, and that wasn't the case. But those were just the things going through my mind because I know how we are and how we have had to operate and conduct ourselves because
as a
you're we were already on this locally a historical landmark, and now it's just like, oh my gosh. But that really was the thing for me that I would tell my mom. I was get angry, like, I'm not going anywhere. I don't want to go to this another thing. I don't want to do it
yes,
anymore. Like, I
right,
don't we don't have to be a part of every single thing. And she would say, I understand,
right,
but you have to, like, it was one of those, I get it, I know how you feel, but you have to understand that now, you know it's almost like you end up having this responsibility. I heard it said when I don't know, it was um one of the recent occurrences, and it was like, well, what should the family come out and say? Like Breonna Taylor, what should
yeah,
her why do we expect them to come out and say
exactly.
anything? Why is it their responsibility to temper everybody else's feelings? And That's all. Like, since then, I that part of it, because we have come to have relationships with a lot of the families that have been impacted by violence, racial violence, and
And you mean outside of Mother Emanuel?
outside of Mother Emanuel. So,
Okay.
like Walter Scott's family or
Okay.
George Floyd's family.
Okay.
So, it's like it's not their job
Thank
to do
you.
that. Like, I don't feel like it's their job, but I get it. I really do get it, because there were times where I even thought, well, if somebody would just come out and say something, it would kind of, you know, bring the tension down, or ease the tension, give a little
I
bit
feel
of
like
calm.
it
But
doesn't
it
though.
shouldn't be the expectation. Like, if
Right.
they want to, then yeah, give them that space. If that's because people grieve differently. I do
Right.
realize that. Um, but it was a lot. And then, we had the flag, which we had the flag come
Yes.
down.
Yes.
So yay, we had
That's
the flag.
like yay. Yay.
We had
It's
the flag come
it's
down.
so funny. I just saw I actually Mother Emanuel was actually literally just on the Sunday morning, CBS Sunday
Yes.
morning. They
Uh-huh.
actually just they did a whole bit on the statues that are being pulled down in the recent years. They said over
Hmm.
100 statues have been pulled down since Mother Emanuel happened, and to see it highlighted, and it's weird to watch it. Not to compare my feelings to yours, because I didn't
Right.
have but it's weird to watch it, because it's like all of a sudden you're using this this incident, this that was not just an incident, but
Right.
an impactful thing
Yeah.
on human beings and human lives. And I get it. I
Yeah.
really do. I get it.
Right.
But people tend to forget the humanity behind it,
Hmm. You
and
see both sides of it.
yeah, yeah.
You see both sides of it, because I was glad. I felt like it should have come down when, and I think
Long
I said this as we were on the steps of the State House. I was like, it should have come down when people were marching from Charleston to Columbia years
hello.
ago, trying to get it taken down. This should have happened then. It should not have, cost us 9 lives
Lives
for this to happen.
for
But
something. Yeah.
I'm glad it's down. But
Right.
it shouldn't have taken this. And hindsight is 2020. I
Right.
get that. But and even now, and I think I shared this with you when we talked about having this interview, that
Right.
normally I would defer to my mom to speak about anything dealing with, or someone else from the family, but
Right.
because it was you,
Oh,
I was
thank you, Jamila.
I wanted to have the conversation, because I think it's important. One of the things that I have in my working with the Memorial Foundation have
Which we're going to get
stressed
into.
the need for changes in education, and I think that
Yes.
I remember having an experience after one of the days at the trial.
Okay.
I went every day of the
Okay.
first phase of the trial,
Okay.
and there was one day, it was in December, so afterwards my son had a program at his school, like a Christmas holiday program.
Okay.
And I remember sitting there and watching all of these little kids, and he was at James Simmons at the time, which, oddly enough, James
Amen.
Simmons now looks like Buse did when we were there. So there were a mixture of kids there.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there looking at these young kids, elementary age kids, thinking, his mom probably sat at a program like this at some point and something went wrong. Like, I'm looking at all of the kids and I'm thinking it could be one of them at some point,
Hmm.
years down the line. You don't know where somebody falls through the cracks.
Right.
And I think because a big part of our lives were spent in school. Like when I think about growing up, it's mostly either the schoolhouse or the playground.
Yeah,
Like
that's
those
basically
are the childhood places you remember being, or even as a high school adolescent, it's school or the
life.
playground or maybe even church. But the
Yeah.
school is a predominant fixture in your life growing up. And
Yeah.
there's so many people that have an opportunity to be the one to turn things around for you.
Mm.
And I remember, like, we always remember those teachers, either the teachers who didn't make, didn't do what they
That's
should have,
right.
or
Mhm.
those who went above and beyond and flipped the switch for
Yes.
us to say,
Yes.
I am going to be this person that I know I can be.
Right.
Or provide such, or open up opportunities for you to have such a bad experience that you know you revert to doing things that I mean, and we all have a choice in that matter, but we
Right.
are influenced by that.
Yeah.
And so education is huge. I mean, I was a
Right.
teacher. Most of my family, my aunt Myra was an English teacher.
Oh,
So that was really important for us. I think
right.
my mom is one of 9 girls, and
I
all,
remember.
yes, like
Yeah.
all but 3 of them were educators.
Right.
So that's always been important to us. But we talk in the with the Memorial Foundation a lot about how we can help try to make some of those changes. I mean, you and I talked earlier about the lack of Black history being taught in schools and what an impact it
Exactly.
would have had on us had it was.
It would
Um,
have been.
yeah,
It
and
really would.
why I'm like one of your listeners said, I am forcing every,
Yeah.
and I don't always have to force it because now it's such second nature that sometimes he'll ask about certain things. He just asked me if we could watch CNN's First Ladies documentary because
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So I was like,
How
pat myself on the
awesome.
back, doing something right, but.
It's
But
kind of
education
cool.
is huge. That's huge. And I think that's where we really can make the most impact, especially on our children. Um,
Absolutely. I
and
think,
that's the group that I like to focus on, our children, because that moment sitting in that auditorium watching those kids and thinking something happened with this child, because I
right.
still saw him as a child sitting in that courtroom. Something happened with him that a lot of people missed.
Hmm.
Not
Yeah.
making excuses, but
No.
something happened that was missed opportunity after missed opportunity. And I don't want to put all of that on educators or to sound like that's what I'm doing, but I also felt like somewhere down the line he got some misinformation about Black people and who we are and what we want out of from this life. He got misinformation, and so
I think my thing is, as kids, seeds, bad seeds and good seeds
yeah.
are planted in us. And
Hmm.
along the way, those seeds are fertilized,
Oh
each
yeah.
one in different ways. And
Hmm.
I feel like the way it works is if one seed gets fertilized, something else may not get it. So
Right.
it's like the rain, it's like it rains
Yes.
one place, but it
Hmm.
doesn't rain another
Bring
place
me out
because
the
that's
place.
how the
Yep.
weather
Hmm.
works. And I think that's how it is. And so it's this idea of along the way, all these different seeds. You said it earlier. Racism is taught.
It is. It's
This
taught.
hatred is taught and it's
Hmm.
learned behavior. So we are, and this is how awesome God is, right? Because he creates us without that.
Right.
When we're brought into the world, we're not brought into the world with any types of negative hatred. We are
Right.
brought into the world feeling love for everything and
Everyone.
everyone.
Everyone. That's
And
innate.
it's
That's the
innate.
thing that's innate. Is
Yeah. So
but
along the way, those seeds that were within him and all the others that have committed these heinous
mhm,
crimes, those seeds were not fed,
the
fertilized,
way that it should have.
nurtured
Right.
the way
And
that they
so
should.
something from outside was able to come in and
Mhm.
take root. And
Right.
that's why I feel like we have to figure out different ways. And I, like I said, I'm not placing this on just the education system. I think there's a lot that we can do to change and to restructure how that's being taught.
Mhm.
But there are other ways that it can be taught as well.
Yeah.
There are other areas where, other places that kids are where they can get that information and should
Yeah.
get it and get the right information. So that's been the topic of our conversations, aside from building the memorial.
Yeah,
Is
I want people to
it
understand that the foundation is beyond, and let's be
right?
clear because we're shifting now.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. So there is now an Emmanuel 9 Foundation. So I
Hmm.
want you to talk about exactly what the Emmanuel 9 Foundation is and what its purpose and goals are.
Okay. So the Emmanuel Nye Memorial Foundation, we are in the process of raising funds to build a memorial on the grounds of the church, on the grounds of Mother Emanuel, to do just that, to memorialize the loved ones that we lost, and just to have a space where people can come to reflect and to process, to think about, and just to soak in all that is a part of their legacy: the love, the honor, the spirit of hope. Just to be able to have that, a place of solitude if you need that. And so we are, um, like I said, in the process of raising the funds to build the memorial. But on the other side of that, as the foundation, we are looking at ways to just encourage everyone to look at um, how racism has come to play in our communities, and to think about different ways that we can begin to have the right conversations, meaningful conversations, ways that we can have that conversation in our households or with our friends and family, or just engage in other areas in our communities, so that we begin to learn more about each other as a whole. And so that's been the broader goal of the Emmanuel 9 Memorial Foundation, because we recognize that each of those 9 lives, they were all impactful in various ways.
Yeah.
Beginning with our pastor being a state senator, and just fighting for our rights as South Carolinians.
Yeah.
And we had my Aunt Myra was, like I said, she was a teacher, um, and just loved educating the youth in the community.
Right.
Um, I mean, just the whole gamut. Cynthia Hurd with the running
Yes.
the library, and literacy was
My
like
friend got the first
passion
one.
for her. Yes, one of our classmates, who's a librarian. Just it's just amazing the reaches that they all had. And I don't want to go down the line, and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
but
and forget anyone.
maybe
I
I will.
understand. If you go to my website, if you go to
Yes.
emmanuel9.org, you'll see the list of names. If you go to my
Oh yeah.
website,
Yes.
the post that I made, the names are listed there. We don't want to neglect
No, no,
the
no.
legacies or names of any of them.
Anybody. But
Yeah.
I mean, I could go through the list with like
Miss Ethel.
Reverend Sharonda, and
Yeah.
her she was also an educator, a counselor, and just phenomenal,
Mm.
phenomenal preacher. Like you just like
See, I
if
didn't
she
know
was
her.
preaching, yes,
I didn't
just
know her.
amazing. Miss Lance, I mean,
Yeah.
Miss Lance took care of us. Like she took care of us, and that was that. You did not come in Mother Emanuel without knowing who Miss Lance was, because she was taking care of everything. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like, I mean, I think about Taiwan's. I remember Taiwan's growing up in the church. Like you always feel like the bigger kid when you're in high
Right.
school and they're in elementary school. So I mean, and just that smile and all of the things that he did and accomplished in his lifetime. It's just amazing. I think about him and I know there's no excuse to not do anything that you have on your heart to do, because
Mm.
in
That's
26
huge.
years he did a lot.
That's deep. Yeah. Yeah. I I know, and she froze for just a second there. Um please, and while I get her back, you
A
guys, you're
lot.
seeing.
And so it's just, you know, hello? Oh, am I
There
back?
you are. There
Okay.
you are.
Okay.
She's
Yeah.
back.
So, we just it's just a huge loss. I mean, I think about Reverend Simmons and just how powerful he was, and
Mm.
knowing, he had that military background. So he was
Oh
a preacher,
boy.
but you were going to stay in line with Reverend Simmons. But
About that.
I mean, it's just those kinds of things that we kind of think back on and just remember about them. And we talk about, when we talk about education, Miss
Mhm.
Susie Jackson. I
Okay.
remember her being my youth leader with YPD, and
Oh
so
wow.
you learned that you were important and you were going to learn out Black history.
How
You were
about
going
that?
to learn it. I mean,
How
she
about
had
that?
the calmest, sweetest, most subtle spirit, but she made sure the children, you knew who you were and whose you were, like first and foremost.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I mean, there's just so much, and um, so yeah, we are working to make sure that their legacies continue and that people learn more about them, and um, just the goals they were working toward. It may have been quiet, it may have been in the background, or it may have been something that you knew about from watching the news, but in some way, they all had an impact on our community, and we don't want to let any of that die. So that's what
So yeah, that's I want you to talk about, because everyone, especially during this time since the pandemic and George George Floyd and all this
yeah,
stuff, people want to know what they can do. First of all, go
right,
vote.
right, right.
Go
Yes,
vote.
vote,
Get
vote,
your butt
vote.
up and go vote, or mail, or whatever it is, whatever you feel
Right,
comfortable doing, vote. Let's just start there. Um, but everyone wants to know different things that they
right.
can do. And I know that I'm a big advocate of contributing to organizations that are on the ground. Thank God for,
Yes,
Black Lives Matter and NAACP and all of those things.
right.
But you guys, it's almost similar to how important it is to vote in your local elections as it
Mm-hmm.
is to vote in your major elections.
Major election.
This is the same kind of thing. You want to contribute to those organizations that are doing the work on the ground. And a big reason, not only because this is a friend I haven't seen in 25 plus years, not only because of her experience, but because she is working with a foundation that is on the ground, that is doing something. So tell us about the
Yes,
17 on
on the
7 on the
17th.
17th. Tell us about
17 on
that.
the 17th. So we are encouraging folks to consider donating $17 on the 17th. We just started this campaign last month, and or in August. And you can donate, and the website is there, Emanuel9.org. But yes, we, in honor of the 9 lives that we lost on June 17th in 2015, we are just asking that you consider contributing to the Memorial Foundation. 17 on the 17th. You can give once if you want, or if every month on the 17th you find it in your heart to give, we would greatly appreciate it. And like Ruthina said, we are on the ground. There are things that we're still figuring this out, but we are committed and really, really focused on making sure that the legacy of those that we lost continue on, and that it stands for something in our community and the greater community. So please, please, please consider contributing. 17th on the 17th, and we want to encourage people to just reconcile your hearts and the
Yeah.
actions that you take, as things get crazy, and we've seen it
Yeah.
over and over again. But to just let love set in,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying you can't be angry, you can't be frustrated, but at the end of the day, love is the thing that will conquer all. And
Yes.
you know
Yes.
it
Um,
definitely helps heal.
it does. It does. So they can contribute $17 on the 17th. And correct me if I'm wrong. Let's say you can't contribute 17. I think it would be awesome if you contribute $9.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
and,
yes,
and
and
in
whatever.
honor of the
No
nine
amount is
on
too
the 17th.
small. Right.
Right.
If you want to give more, we would greatly appreciate that. But if
Thank
whatever you can contribute is definitely will be used for good, and we appreciate it.
Right.
We definitely appreciate it.
So this particular, while we're recording today, this particular podcast episode will be officially launched on the 17th of this month, on October 17th. And so if you are hearing this right now on the 17th, go to Emanuel9.org
Yes.
right now, and you will see where you can make that contribution to this awesome, awesome legacy of 9 people. It is something I promise I know myself will go towards making a difference.
Yes.
So check out that website and do that as well. Jamila, first of all, don't go away.
I won't. I won't.
But Jamila, thank you so much for sharing your story, first of all. Because you said yourself that you're not down for this all time.
No.
So thank you so much for sharing your story. If you are up to do another one, maybe next year, I would love to
Yes.
talk to you again about other stuff, because I love
Right.
great conversation.
Oh
This is
yes.
also great conversations. Um, so I would love to talk to you again. But thank you so much for sharing your story. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me. And of course, I would talk to you anytime, anytime. We got 20, 25 years worth of stuff to talk about. So, yes, anytime.
I know, right? I don't have time to put all of them up, but everyone's saying thank you for sharing. Thank you for
Oh,
sharing. Thank you for
you're
sharing.
welcome. Thank
Thank
you
you for
for
sharing.
being a part and listening.
So, Jamila, I'm going to pull you for just a moment
Okay.
as I close us out. So, you guys, I want you to go to Emanuel9.org, check out that website, look at all the wonderful work that they're doing in regards to the memorial, in regards to contributing to this awesome legacy. In the meantime, if you have any other questions, I know I do have a post up about my reaction to what happened there. You can go to RuthinaPorterfield.com and check it out there. Again, if you are listening to this on the 17th, go to Emmanuel9.org and contribute to the 17 on the 17th. I will actually put a link up so that you can click right on it. So there's no excuse. So in the meantime, I pray that this was a blessing to you and your heart and liberated your spirit in some way. Until our next conversation, peace, stay cool, and God bless.